All right. Hello to everybody that is tuning in tonight for another wonderful episode of the Coach's Corner. As everyone's getting settled, just a couple words. By all means, ask questions. Just drop them in the chat box. I'll keep an eye out on that and pass it off to our wonderful coaches tonight. And that being said, I will pass this off to your grace, Duke Sean.
Hey, good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us. Oh, I'm muted, right? No, I'm good. Okay. Yeah, hello, everyone. Thank you again for joining us Friday night for Coach's Corner. Tonight, we have a couple of our regular coaches, Sir Octamasades and His Grace Duke Eliahu joining us. And tonight, we have a very special guest with Duke Timothy of Arindale, who is kind enough to join us to kind of talk about some of his fighting philosophy and training methodology. So, Tim, would you be kind enough to introduce yourself?
I am Timothy of Arindale. I authorized in March of 1983, and somewhere along the way, actually figured out how to do this thing reasonably well. I was knighted in Atlantia in 1990, won my first crown in Caid in 92, won Eastern Crowns in 95 and 98, and have won 4 in Ethelmark over the last 8 years or so. My job is just, I look at my job in the SCA is to try and help other people along their way. That's kind of my philosophy on everything.
Cool. So, Tim, let's start with how did you find the SCA and how did you get your start?
Like most kids, most people my age, I played a phenomenal amount of D&D in high school. My best friend was, "Hey, Tim, I've got a new D&D group. We should go over and play Saturday." Like, well, hey, that'll be fun. I'm always looking for a new game. And he drove us over to, my high school was on a military post, and we drove to the rec center at Fort Meade, Maryland, and we pulled into the parking lot, and there were 6 or 8 guys fighting in really bad circa 1981 armor in a group where there really was no guidance. The nearest knight at that time was about 2 hours away, and nobody had a clue, but I'd found my tribe.
Was that the Storvik group?
Storvik was the closest group. We were actually, the group we found was the incipient Shire of Arindale. Technically, I do not have a registered name. My device is registered, but my SCA, my device is registered to my SCA holding name of my mundane name and the local group that hasn't existed in about 35 years.
That's hilarious.
But yeah, Storvik was the closest group of people who knew what they were doing.
Right on. Right on. And what would you say is your general fighting philosophy? Do you consider yourself an offensively minded fighter or a defensively minded fighter or counterpuncher? What are you what's your general philosophy?
If I had to categorize myself, it's a counterpuncher, especially after I moved primarily to buckler. When I was coming up, I was just a speed demon. I mean, I had obscene hand speed, and I was really, really overconfident in that hand speed, and I would win most of my fights just because I could hit somebody before they could break through my reasonably awful defense. But over the years, I learned the physiology involved, and to me, that's the whole key to everything. It all comes down to physiology, and I don't mean that from my perspective and what I'm capable of. I mean that from where can my opponent actually throw from where they're at. Unlike a lot of people, I only rarely watch tape, more to see, what did I do wrong with my technique? I don't analyze my opponents. I look at that as I'm playing their game. If I'm looking at their tape, watching their footage, seeing what they're doing, I'm trying to adjust myself to them. And to me, that's the exact opposite I want to do. I want to fight my game. And if I'm okay, this fighter has a tendency to do such and such, I'm playing into their court. So what I'll typically do is adjust my stance to this is what my opponent can throw from there. They're capable of hitting me here. Their second most likely place to hit me is here or there, and I'll coach my defense accordingly and try and throw my offense in such a way that it breaks through that spot, which is the only way I can get by with, a 12-inch buckler against the deep end of the pool fighters with, gargantuan barn door heaters. And that's been kind of my personal fighting revelation of the last 5 or 6 years. I've totally changed the way I do things. And it's all, you don't have to have a really, really fast defense if you know where your opponent's going to throw before they move their arm. As soon as they twitch, you know where it's going. And fakes seem to no longer be vogue, at least in our geographic area. So they're playing into my hand.
So if that's your fighting philosophy, what would you say your teaching philosophy is? So Coach's Corner is about teaching people and teaching people, helping them learn to be better fighters. What would you say your approach or your philosophy is to teaching fighting?
I try to explain to them why different things why they work the way they do. I ran a class a couple years back, and I did it at a bunch of different universities in a couple of kingdoms, but I did on 10 little things people have forgotten how to do. And it's just, you ask 50 different people how to throw a snap, and you're going to get 50 different responses, 50 different, this is how I do it, this is how so-and-so does it, and so forth. But when I'm going through it, this is why I'm doing it. Each little action has something that you can take from it. And I teach people I work with, treat different teachers like a buffet. My personal style has built up from, I have a little bit of Sir Strykar. I have a little bit of Sir Narlik. I have a little bit of Michael of Bedford. And I've just pulled from different people as I see their stuff over the years. And like that buffet, that is slowly built into my style. And I tell them, look, if you pick up some stuff from me, that's great. All my stuff won't work for you. Maybe you're 5 foot tall and really slow. The stuff I do isn't necessarily going to work, but if you understand when I'm teaching, this is why I'm throwing that snap the way I throw it. If you understand why, even if you don't take the whole thing from that, that's one little tidbit you can gather. And it's amazing to me how many even experienced fighters, even Shiv level fighters, they've been throwing a snap for 20 years and don't understand why that particular aspect of it works that way. Most of you were taught, I was always taught the smell the soup before you hand it to your opponent. And I'm explaining to people, when I'm bringing this in front of me and throwing it across, my sword arm is protected by the sword blade, as opposed to if I throw it more over the shoulder, my arm is exposed. And people are, I never really thought about that. And it's all those little nuances that to me work from taking the mid-range and slightly above mid-range fighters to that next step they want to get to.
I really like how you refer to it as a buffet. Because I mean, as somebody that's been around a long time myself, and Eli as well, we've stolen stuff from everybody that we've come across. But one of the things that I found as a trainer is when somebody has access to all of this vast information, there's this tendency to, if you're getting something from Timothy and you're getting something from Sean and you're getting something from Branos and Eli, there's this tendency for people to try to be all of those things, instead of taking the parts of each of us that work well for their body and for their past experiences and all that. But I think there's just people, like, when you get all this good advice and you want to honor the time that people have spent giving you their time, and so there's this tendency to try to like do what they're telling you to do and try to be all of those great trainers all at once, and that just doesn't work.
No, I mean, I really lucked into it. You mentioned earlier the Storvik group. The Storvik group is, when I started, we'd been in about maybe a year and a half before we started to contact groups outside of our own little shire. Up to that point, we had our Saturday practice and that was it. But one of the guys started driving down to the Storvik practice. We had a practice at the Gunston Community Center where the weekly practice had 50 or 60 fighters, and circumstances were such that all of a sudden we moved in about a dozen nights into the DC area. And they treated us as like a communal pool of squires. They would pull you aside, hey, Tim, you're doing this. Or, hey, Stefan, you're doing that. And, our level just climbed. It was scary to watch it. And that's why, if one of my squires wants to learn from somebody else, it's, hey, go take, Branos's class. My footwork is pathetic compared to Branos's, but I'll help you as best I can with his stuff. But yes, there's a lot of stuff to be gained from different people. And, take that, see what works for you, and we'll try and blend it into your style.
And that's really key, is helping our students to take everything from that buffet and understand how to filter it and how to integrate it into what will work for them. Because sometimes they don't know how to do that, but we can help them with that.
Well, yeah, I mean, from my understanding is that you all approach things pretty much the same way I do. I am not a fan of private practices. If I have a weekend thing on every Thursday night that only my squires come to, I don't subscribe to that. I will work with anybody who wants to learn. I will teach them to the best of my abilities if they want to learn, whether I think, whether it's somebody else's squire, whether it's somebody who might potentially knock me out of a crown, I don't care. It is my job as a knight. It is my job as one of the longtime members of this organization to try it and help everyone reach their goals. And so when one of my squires wants to work with somebody else, that's great. If somebody comes up to me, hey, I'm so-and-so squire, I see you throwing this shot. Can you show me how that's done? I'll happily work with you. And that's the way we as an organization build our skill level. You've all been around as long as I have. And, I look at the level of ability that we have now compared to where we were 30 years ago. 30 years ago, our top flight guys now ever been able to, nobody could have touched them 30 years ago.
Yeah.
The skill level is just through the roof, and we've learned that as we go along. We have new shots, we have new techniques, we have a better understanding of frankly, the fundamentals. It's no matter, it all does eventually blend into the same place.
Yeah, in seeing the work that you did, especially in your leading up to the last crown that you won, where you were fighting with the buckler, you just kind of mentioned something that I think is really kind of encapsulates like what you exude as a as a fighting philosophy. And, you just said that, it doesn't matter if I'm teaching somebody who's potentially going to knock me out of crown, right? And, the whole point of that sort of thinking is it's like, yeah, I'm going to make you as good as you possibly can, because if you knock me out of crown, that means I need to get better. And that's the way that this thing has always worked, is if I make you better, that forces me to be better on top of that. And that's the evolution of our sport. That's what makes this sport continue to grow and be better all the time, is that whole idea that, yeah, a couple of weeks before crown, yeah, I'm going to teach you this thing. I'm not going to hide what I have so that I can compete with you in crown, because if I'm going to win that list, it has to be because my fight is just better and I've worked harder to do it.
Yeah, I mean, you just have you have to do that. When I was coming up, there were probably 12 or 14 of us squires that were give or take at the same level. And when you missed a practice, the other guys didn't. And you were playing catch up, and we pushed ourselves. It was, yes, we were all motivated by, our ladies, our goals, or what have you, but each of us was motivated by, those other guys are better than I. And if better than I am, and if I don't push myself, I'm going to get forgotten. And I mean, that crowd ended up being some phenomenal fighters, and that was because we pushed ourselves. And that's right now what I'm trying to do with our local group. It was really really nice. For a couple of years, we had Duke Dietrich here, formerly from Atlantia, but then he's just moved to Trimaris during the pandemic. But you had the two of us here, and I mean, unbelts were making 2-hour drives to come out to our practice because we had that level of competition. And fortunately, as much as they can, they're still pushing themselves. The pandemic has really put a crimp on things, but I get videos from them. Here I'm doing pel work, or here I'm going to the gym. We get to fight occasionally, and you can see their progress. They're still pushing themselves in the same way. And right now I'm kind of using that as my motivation, because I've achieved what I can achieve as a fighter. As a singles fighter, I'm yeah, yes, I'll still be able to get better, but I've won crowns in 3 kingdoms. I've won big tournaments. You know, I've achieved what I want to achieve as a single fighter. So my goal at this point, and I'm using it to push myself, is I want our local practice. It is my goal to have our local practice essentially be what Nutley was at its peak. And Nutley is still an amazing thing, and I can't wait to go back. But I want people to look at our local group as, I'm gearing up for Crown. I want to drive out to Lewisburg, Pennsylvania,
Of all places.
of all places, to get ready for Crown. I mean, it was easier when I had Dietrich here, but we between the two of us, we pushed the unbelts and raised the level substantially. So hopefully they'll be able to soldier on even without him here. I won't know for certain until we finish coming out of the pandemic, but I'm pretty confident.
Yeah. We'll probably get back to that in a little bit, but we had a question that came in on the live feed there that I kind of want to address, that I think you are uniquely qualified to address. So, having come from Atlantia and the land of the 2x3 heater, as you mentioned, and now having transitioned to most recently a buckler and or smaller, the question we had that came in is, what is one bit of advice for a fighter changing to use a much smaller shield, like going from a 36, 24 by 36 to like a 20 by 30?
If I had to give one phrase of advice, it would be, give yourself a chance to adjust. Even it takes me a few passes to adjust from buckler mode to heater mode, because they're entirely different things. If somebody's gearing up for Crown locally, hey, can you strap on your buckler, because I want to get deep end heater fighter, what have you. It takes a little while to adjust, but they are totally different techniques. Fighting a small shield as a big shield. and it takes a while to learn them. If you switch over to say say one of the short West Kingdom heaters, it will take a fighter a while to learn the techniques. Yes, if you fight it the same way you did a 24 by 36-inch heater, you're not going to do very well. You have to give it time to understand. I Before the pandemic, I traveled to Atlantia pretty often for practices. I would say probably once every 6 or 8 weeks, I'd be in Atlantia for a practice. And, I don't know why it evolved that way, but the bigger shields, they're almost using them as, okay, I've set up this wall. Now that I've protected myself with this gargantuan wall, I can throw a shot. And it's very, to my mindset with the buckler and the little tiny shield, it is shield action, sword action, shield action, sword action. I find it very, very easy to time, even some of the better fighters. Where with buckler, to me, it is, my sword is a sword. It's also a shield. My shield is a shield, and it's also a sword. Obviously, I can't punch somebody with the buckler, but I can use it with binding.
Right.
I'll make contact sword to sword, hand it off to my buckler. Then I'm now controlling the fight, and I can throw with the sword. It's a mentality that doesn't exist with the big shields, because you're so used to, I got this big barn door. I can block everything with this big barn door. I pick up a big heater, and it's almost like a cheat code. I feel like nobody can hit me. I got this immense thing. I can stand behind it, and nobody ever hits me. With the buckler, I have to move. I have to think. I have to juke. With the heater, I can get by without having to sword block. With the buckler, especially, as I said earlier, the fakes aren't really vogue in this area anymore. But with the little teeny buckler, people know, okay, if I fake him, he can't block with just the buckler. He has to use the sword as well, stack his blocks. So it's such a different mindset. Somebody who goes from a big shield to a little shield has to give it time to learn it, because it's all new techniques.
Well,
I was a bit verbose, but that's what I was trying to say.
well, when you're doing those new techniques and when you're adjusting to that shield, it's more than just, because you were mentioning earlier about setting up your lines so you know where the lines have to be for your opponent to come in. And
Yes.
how do you change up your footworks and your core body mechanics when you're switching to that smaller shield? So I think that's almost bringing that more into bear a lot of times than any part of the other technique that you'd be modifying.
I pay so much more attention to my foot lead when I'm doing heater than I do with buckler. When I'm fighting buckler, I will go through almost without thinking, switch from a right foot lead to a left foot lead as I'm doing different things. With a heater, I almost exclusively use a left foot lead until somebody closes. Then I'll switch to a right foot lead. But because with the buckler, as I said, it's a sword, it's a shield, it's a sword, it's a shield. It's so fluid, it doesn't matter to me. Yes, it affects the dynamics. If I'm in a right foot lead, the range is different. If I'm in a left, then if I'm in a left foot lead, and if I'm fighting a right-handed opponent, it's different than a left-handed opponent. But for me, it's become instinctive. But more to your question, the body mechanics I don't really worried about. I have a large advantage over a lot of fighters. In my late teens and early 20s, I framed houses. So driving nails all day, I can still throw shots from very, very and develop plenty of force with very, very little effort. I really don't have to worry about my body positioning as much as a lot of guys who really have to develop, they have to work all the time and properly generate the force with their hips. I know all those techniques. I show those techniques. I teach them to people. But, you know, I can't throw the Bruce Lee 1-inch death punch, but I haven't really ever had to really worry about mechanics to generate force. What I have to worry about body positioning is for things like voiding shots. And if I'm in the right foot lead, physiologically speaking, this is what I block. Back to my initial set of comments, my opponent is in, say they're in the Atlantean A-frame. You know, from the Atlantean A-frame, you know, I know that they have, you know, from this stance, if you will, they have a rather quick shot to the leg. They have a weak offside. They can kind of poke into the face, or they can bring it around as a wrap. Everything else takes a little bit more time to develop. So I am couching my stance, my position to block those shots. And I want to throw if I'm initiating the engagement, I'm going to throw my shot through where their angle is that they're most likely to be able to hit me. Any other angle that I'm throwing, if they do anything else, I have plenty of time to react with the teeny little buckler. So even if I'm initiating the contact, initiating the engagement, to me, I'm almost still counterpunching because I'm basing my offense on where you're at, and I'm preventing you to throw based on what I'm throwing. Again, with the Atlantean A-frame, you know, if let's go to a different one, doesn't really apply to that. If they're in the traditional vanilla position, you know, your SCA 101 Known World Handbook circa 1982, you know, this is where a flat snap is coming from, whether it's the head or the leg. You get an offside depending on the range. So I'm going to throw my shot in such a way that if you start a shot, I'm blocking it. And then I will make contact, hand it off to my buckler, and take it from there. So again, I don't have to watch tape of, you know, say I was gearing up against, say I was expecting the hardest competition at this upcoming crown to be Duke Malcolm. I don't know if he's fighting or not. I don't think he is. But a lot of people would watch tape of him saying, okay, what is Malcolm going to hit me with? I don't do that. You know, I know this is the stance Malcolm is in when he is fighting me at any given time during the tournament. I don't need to know his tendencies. I need to know, physiologically speaking, in order to hit me, this is the spot he hits me fast enough. I wish I had the musical background. I've been trying to associate this whole concept with tempo and beat and rhythm and so forth and so on. It takes a certain amount of time for this shot to develop. It takes a little bit longer for that shot to develop, and he totally has to change his position to throw anything else. Therefore, even though I have a teeny little shield, I know where it's going to come. So rather than watching his tape, I just know, physiologically speaking, this is what's coming. So half the time my block is in place before they even start their shot. As soon as they twitch, I'm there because I know it's coming. As soon as they twitch the other way, I'm here because that's coming. I adjust my stance accordingly on the fly, and then when they do something stupid, I hit them.
I'm curious if you've studied any of the 133 sword and buckler manual, because some of what you're describing about how you're handing off the sword to your buckler and some other things is very much out of that. And I'm wondering if that's something you studied and are.
I had for a while, but then mundane life got busy. From working with Sir Strykar in my earlier days, when he was still active in Atlantia, he taught me all those things. You know, binding, all those things that it's different shades of controlling the center. When I was first starting buckler, I had been reasonably decent at polearm, and you know, I was always awful at greatsword. But when I was picking up buckler, Stryker was like, "Look, now fight it as if it's a greatsword." And I'm thinking, and it's just controlling the center. But that's how you make the contact. When you're binding, you're controlling. By controlling where my opponent can go, whether it's controlling the center or just controlling the whole thing, it's right out of I-33. But as I said, I got that more through osmosis than actual studying it hardcore. We had a mundane, one of the long point champions, a mundane named Ben Strickling. We paid him to come up and do a lesson probably 5 years ago. And I had not done much direct studying with the I-33, but that's what we had him come up and teach. And it was just, okay, there's a name for these things I'm doing. You know, the similarities were amazing. As much as it was, you know, sometimes it was reinventing the wheel. Sometimes it was, you know, I learned it from different people coming up. But yeah, all of that is directly applicable to what we're doing.
Well, that's really interesting too, because you get the, you know, you get the buckler fighting that you've done by intuition and by experience, you know, translating 30 years of experience into this new tool. And then you get somebody who has studied this more deeply, and you come to find out that, oh, this thing that I'm doing by intuition, oh, you have a name for this. That's cool.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of form follows, you know, it has to work. This is the way it works. And like I said, I get that as much from learning from other people. I don't want to make it sound like I feel like I reinvented the wheel, because I certainly didn't. It's, you know, we're all doing this, and Strykar in particular has done probably more work than anyone in the SCA on the historical manuals. I don't know if any of you are familiar with him, but if you look at a lot of the translations, his mundane name is essentially all of the authors are almost everyone I've looked in. We'd like to thank Steve Hicks for helping us with the translation of this manuscript. You know, he has done most of them, at least to some extent. I really hate that he is retired from fighting for many years.
Interesting. So you also mentioned a couple of times talking about watching tape and how you do that. I know I teach a class on how to analyze video. We've done several episodes here on the Coach's Corner on how to do that as well. And you know, you touched on something that you know, I'm constantly preaching about how to watch video, and this idea that, you know, watching video so that you can get a leg up on an opponent just never made sense to me. It's not that I would consider it unchivalrous, but for me, it just kind of goes back to this idea that I can't make somebody else a worse fighter. I can only make me a better fighter. And as I'm watching video, I'm the same way with you. I'm looking at what am I doing wrong and what can I fix, because that's what I can control, and that's what I can fix. I can't. I mean, anything that I'm going to see in an opponent on video, like, I'm not necessarily going to see that in the fight. And if I expect to have that fight, you know, I mean, especially if I'm watching him fight somebody, a totally different fighter, and if I expect to see that fight in Crown, and that's what I'm banking on, and then all of a sudden I get there and the fight doesn't go the way that I had planned, all my preconceived notions are gone out the window.
Every time I go into a fight knowing what I'm going to throw, you know, this is so-and-so, I'm going to hit him with this. Every time that I can recall going into a tourney fight like that, I lose.
Yep, absolutely.
Up until very, very recently, I would say my peak era in fighting was probably, you know, my peak level of ability was probably about 1997. And I was going up to a Crown in Massachusetts, and I mean, I was convinced, yep, I win this one. I get to make my lady a duchess. I'm good. Lost to a guy I'd authorized that morning, and lost to a fighter that I beat every practice like a drum if I so chose, because in the first fight I went in completely overconfident. I authorized this guy, no fuss, no muss. And I went to the second fight. It's Bill. I'm going to hit Bill using this shot, the same thing I hit him with all the time. Went into both fights with preconceived notions and went 0-2 like I should have. And that era, like I said, other than just recently, the last few years when I actually feel like I understand what's going on, up until recently, I would have put that at the peak of my ability as a fighter. My head was not screwed on right, and that's what you get.
So as we are getting back to having in-person events again, this sounds like a timely reminder for those of us who are intending to enter Crown in the next 6 months or so.
Yeah, I'm like I said, I love the pageantry. I love the competition, but it's somebody else's turn. I feel that my wife and I think we do a good job, and I think the kingdom, we do the best job we can in the kingdom, but I would like to see the SCA undergo some kind of a change after this pandemic we've all suffered through. If we can have some of us grizzled vets kind of step to the side and let young kids do things, whether it's reigns, whether it's kingdom officers, what have you, I think that's really, really necessary. I think we're getting closer and closer, at least in the areas I frequent, we're turning into the DAR. In 20 years, we're going to be 70-year-olds sitting around drinking tea, remembering the good old days. A couple of my guys are active or converts from Daggy here, and all the young people in all these organizations. I mean, I hate to put it out like this, but yeah, whenever we get somebody from the SCA, when we get a knight come over from the SCA to a Daggy event, it's a 50-year-old fat white guy who comes and hits on our 20-year-old girls. I mean, they have, that's what their experience is. And, I would like us to have a couple of people, even if they're not quite there yet from a prowess level. I'd like to see us have some of these guys, some of these 20, and I use the guys in a gender neutral way, but have some of these young people take the lead and bring, who wants to bop around with a 50-year-old guy at Penzic? We need kings and queens and princes and princesses who are in their 20s. We need to have knights who are in the 20s, to my mind, to bring the age down. And how do we get there? That's what my eldest two put on armor and fought with us at Penzic a few times in 100 minutes for as much as anything, because let's humor dad. Dad enjoys this. Let's let this happen. And I asked him, why are we not attracting the younger crowd? And they're like, who wants to go hang out with their dad's friends? And they weren't meaning that at me. They were meaning that, if I'm a 20-something, everybody in this organization is in their 40s and 50s. And that's what we're up against. And that's kind of, while it's a little off topic, that's where I'm hoping we can go somehow after this pandemic. And I just don't know how to get from A to B.
It's probably more on topic than you might think, because we've actually had a discussion about doing an episode on how we do how we do recruiting and how to get kids these days to be excited about what we do in the way that we were excited about it when we were in our 20s, and quite frankly, the way that I'm still excited about it now. So. And actually, that brings up something else that I wanted to ask you. When you did your interview with Sir Rivkin last year, you made a comment that really has stuck with me as somebody who also got knighted in the 80s, and Eliahu certainly falls into this category as well. You'd said that at the time that you got knighted, nobody in the society had been doing it this long.
Yep.
I got knighted AS 22, and so and I just had 34 years of being a knight. Yeah, I mean, it's mind-boggling that we could be doing it this long and still enjoying it as much as we are. Would you like to expand on that a little bit?
I mean, it's frustrating to me. I have been in chivalry meetings, and it's been a while since this particular comment came up. but where some of the guys are, look, if you're not making the finals of Crown, the semifinals of Crown, or the semifinals of King and Queens or Tam champions, we shouldn't even be discussing you. And I look around the room, and it's 2/3 of the fighters in the room on their best day didn't sniff that atmosphere. And it's just, how can we expect a young fighter coming up? I don't even need I don't have to have a guy beat me 5 out of 10 in order for me to think he's ready to get knighted. He or she, sorry, I apologize. I need to know that they understand how this works. I would like us to some extent, back down the prowess requirement and up not up, but more look at knights to be as ambassadors to the society. That's the people I would like to see. If we can bump a few 20-somethings over the edge in that regard, I think it would give our organization a shot that I can't even imagine. We have 3 or 4 fighters in Ethelmark who are, we to a man just want that last little bit to make that last little step, and then they're ready prowess wise because everything else they have in spades. I'd like us to see, why wait? If that man or woman is a knight in every other way and their prowess is just a little bit, just a little lacking, why make them? Maybe it takes them 10 years to get that extra little step. And then instead of having a 20-something, young, energetic, enthusiastic, by the time he finally gets done, he or she is withered, they're burnt out. Now we've got young kids, so they can't go out and go to events. It was in the 80s when I got knighted, it was easy. Very few of us had children. Some of us had wives, but a lot of us met our wives in the organization. Hey, we can throw our stuff in the trunk and drive 6 hours to an event this weekend. And we're expecting, these candidates who, they have 2 kids. They've got ballet recitals, they've got baseball games, they've got, hockey practice to go to with their kids. But we're expecting them to achieve the same levels of prowess that when I was a 22-year-old kid and had no responsibilities whatsoever, I got off of work at 3 p.m. on Friday. It was no big deal to drive 12 hours to an event. We could do that. And gas was, $1 a gallon. I think we're expecting too much prowess wise. But that's my own little bugaboo. And like I said, I authorized in 1983, and Eliahu, you've been doing this far longer than I have. I think you reigned at my first Pennsic. I think you were king at 12.
I was knighted in 83 and I reigned at Pennsic 13.
But I mean,
but I was knighted at Pennsic 12.
I mean, it's different now. When I started, I think I first picked up armor in AS-16, and the oldest knight, once we got involved with the closest group that had chivalry, Storvik, the oldest grizzled knight he'd been a knight 6 or 7 years, and he was just, wow, this guy's been here forever, he must know everything. And now it's, a lot of us have been fighting for 40 years. We can look at somebody's stance. Oh, look, he moved his foot like that, he's about to throw. And we don't have to think about it. It's instinctive. And we're expecting people to compete with these reflexes we've developed over decades. And it's just not right. It's again, that's, I'm kind of a heretic for saying this, but that's my thoughts.
I want to just thank you for stating this. I've been in more than one chivalry meeting where a Duke spoke up and said of a candidate, well, he can't beat me. And we all looked at each other, and finally somebody spoke up and said, I think it was me, Your Grace, not a lot of people can beat you. You're judging a candidate for this order by the standards of the top of this order, and that's not fair. The quality, as you mentioned, the quality of what we do, the art, the skill of what we do has certainly increased, and we want it to keep increasing. But there is an entry level bar of prowess, and it's not necessarily mastery. It's the start of that. It's understanding how that somebody understands that the fight is about controlling the fight. They understand how to use the tools they have, and that's how they're fighting like a knight. That doesn't mean they're fighting like the best knight or the most skilled knight. So thank you.
Yeah, I tend to fall in the same category as Tim, where, I don't expect somebody to have to be able to beat me X number of times out of X number of fights. My evaluation on that has typically just been that you have to give me concern. You have to give me pause. I have to think about what I'm doing when I face you, and know that I just can't blow you off, right? And that I'm going to have a fight on my hands, and that doesn't mean you're going to win even a majority of the fights that you fight with against me, but you have to give me pause. And I also have, I've never said that somebody can't be knighted because they can't beat me, because like Eliahu said, that is an absurd standard. And I have been, when I have said that somebody is not ready or they didn't have enough prowess, I have been criticized by that, and people saying that, well, they shouldn't have to be as good as you to get knighted. And I agree with that. But by the same token, to Eli's point, and I think yours as well, Tim, that with the evolution of the sport over the last 30 years, they should be better than I was 30 years ago, because the sport has gotten better. And yes. I think it's just, we need to evaluate people within their contemporaries. You don't have to be the best fighter in the kingdom, but you should be easily among the best unbelted fighters in the kingdom, because those are the people that's the body that we have to evaluate their prowess by.
Yeah, I mean that's a perfect way of looking at it.
It's the drive they bring too, right? It's the passion for their learning. It's what are they doing in their local areas? How are they raising their community up? I think that's important as well. And you have somebody that's contributing at that level, and they are impassioning other folks of like mind, like you were talking about having your group. I think we all had our group of people that were like our puppy pack, where I'm beating on these guys one time, and then these guys come up, and I think that community is important. And you're right. Each of those communities is getting a lot bigger. We need to really revitalize youth in our sport.
Well, there is a certain camaraderie amongst your graduating class, as it were. The people that you were unbelted with, that you were coming up with, and you're like, hey, what are you doing against Sean? And how are you beating Tim? And you get to fight these guys. And I think, when I was a squire, I think there was a lot more collaboration amongst the unbelted community. I think there's a bit more competition amongst the unbelted community, and I think some of that is our doing. As an order, I think we may have inadvertently, possibly through what Tim is talking about, the maybe having increased standards. We just kind of, I was talking to another one of our newer knights about this just recently, that like there is this idea amongst the unbelted fighters that chivalry is a pie, and that there's only so many pieces of the pie to go around, and it's not. And if we can have some of that unbelted community do more collaboration and working with each other, that camaraderie that you get lasts a lifetime.
Sean?
Yeah.
Sean?
I mean,
yeah.
Now I really want pie.
I was told there would be punch and pie.
Yeah. So
nice
thanks.
reference. But yeah, I mean, it's, I have such fond memories of the guys I came up with. I mean, don't get me wrong. You know, having my lady, she's the center of my universe when I'm on the field. But young Tim, I have such happy memories of coming up as a squire and doing stupid things with my buddies when we would, let's at the time I was coming up, Atlantia and Trimaris had a war, even though that we didn't have a border. One year, Atlantia would drive down and fight in Jacksonville, and the next year, Trimaris would drive up and fight in South Carolina, in Columbia, South Carolina. And we lived in Baltimore, and it would be, you know what? Sea Wars is coming up this weekend. Let's road trip down to Jacksonville, Florida for a weekend event. And, a bunch of us 18, 19, 20-year-old kids, piled into a van and drove pretty much through the night, fought, took a nap in the car and then left early Sunday morning. I'm 54 years old. I'm not going to do that anymore. But it's one of those memories you have as a squire, and I'm glad that in our area, the communal pool of squires, if you will, is starting to develop that mindset.
Yeah, I think that's important. And I think you guys kind of hit it too, Sean. We need to foster that as chivalry. Foster that it's not necessarily a competition. You have an ability to get all your contemporaries together and evolve the sport.
Yeah.
Find that peace, and I think that's really important. And it's nice to see, Tim, that you've done that. Talk to us about Adult Swim.
Adult Swim was random how that started. When I moved to Ethelmark, we had one pretty decent unbelt locally who had mundane life has kept him inactive now since he's been knighted. But for the most part, the nearest knight to me in Ethelmark is over 2 hours away, and relatively inactive. So when I wanted to practice where somebody would push me, I would drive 3.5 hours to Nutley. And I would do that probably once every 6 or 8 weeks. And I said to them, hey, if I set up a weekend where instead of me grabbing 1 or 2 of the unbelts in the car, kidnapping them and driving to Nutley every once in a while, how about I pick up a weekend and you guys drive out here and work with all the unbelts I can gather in one place? And, Brennan and Gregor and the crew were all more than happy to do so. Duke Brennan was very, very helpful with getting everybody on board with that. And at the time, I happened to be Prince of Ethelmark, and that was when we were gearing up for Ethelmark and the world fight against the Middle and the East Kingdom. And I happened to have a business trip to Onstiora, and in that trip, I happened to meet Sven. And, I went to the local practice and I said, hey, we're trying to set this thing up. And Sven was, yeah, I'll make it. And I talked to a few of my friends in Atlantia, and they're like, yeah, I can come up for this. And we hit a point where once we hit 6 or 7 of the deep end, it just snowballed. Everybody was like, wait, you're going to get Duke Bryan is going to come down from the Boston area. Sven's going to fly up from Atlantia. It just snowballed. Nigel's going to come down from, Eldemir. And we ended up at the first one. There were something like 60 or 70 knights. Wow. And at this point, it's just gotten ridiculous. I mean, the last year we had one, there were over 700 people.
Wow.
It's but the thing about Adult Swim, at least to me, that makes it the learning environment there were no egos present. No matter who you are, there is somebody there who's going to take your lunch money. And so everybody checks their egos at the door. And I don't know if I ever saw a case where an unbelt asked a more experienced fighter for a fight and he passed. Every belted fighter, every experienced fighter made all the time they possibly could for the less experienced fighters. And we've always done it free form, not really any official class schedule. We pretty much set them up that morning or, during the week leading into it. And everybody is always willing to share. Sometimes I'll ask a few people in particular, Ryan Mark, can you do a class on your left-handed style? Or, Branos, can you do a class on footwork? Dietrich, can you do a class on longsword? But for the most part, it's just been so, I guess, organic, the way it happens, that it works well. I mean, the first 2 or 3 years, we didn't even have a site fee. It was, hey, we're going to put out a can. It's $2 a head or something. It was a site fee was like $2. The lady who rents us the warehouse realized, hey, I've got 700 people in here. I should actually make some money on this thing. And I'm happy to look out for Megan, because she's been nothing but good to us. But we've tried to make it as laid back and unofficial as possible for an official event. And that's been part of the charm of the thing. As it's grown, we've had to be, more official about doing armor inspections and everything, but we treat it as a big fighter practice.
One of the things I love about Adult Swim is, there are larger events that we go to, and possibly, more fighters in a given location, but for the purpose of just practice and just training, when there's no war to be at, there's no other tournaments to go to, there's no shopping to be done. Adult Swim, in my estimation, is the single largest collection of talent that the society has ever seen. There are so many great fighters from all across the world present at that event, and all of them willing to teach. As you mentioned, I had the last year we were there. I'm really bad about taking pictures of people, so I decided that year I was going to take pictures of everybody that I fought with, and I counted up at the end of the first day, and I'd fought 25 different people of all varying skill levels, and I could have fought a lot more, but every time I got done with one of those fighters, I was taking time to go over the fights we had and do some training with them and try to make them better fighters. And I think, very much to your point, all of the best fighters that you have at Adult Swim are of that very same mindset, where they're there to share their information with anybody who of any caliber, of any rank, that is willing to listen.
Well,
I mean, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to put my 2 cents in that beyond just, I'm thinking 700 people, what kind of cardio do I need to get in before I go to Adult Swim so I can get all the fights I could possibly get? But then I'm thinking the other great gift you're giving folks is this connections. You might not get to fight 700 people, but you might get to talk. You might fight 25, but talk to 50, and you build these lifelong connections. And I think that's amazing.
I have been so astounded with how Adult Swim works out. As I said, the original intent was to have, the few guys from Nutley come out for a fighter practice to teach some of the locals, because there's only so much I can do with all, I can't work with 25 guys at a single get together. And it grew into just something that's special. And the amount of times I see people change their Facebook profile picture, and you can look at the background. Yep, that fighting picture was taken from Adult Swim.
That's the warehouse.
You'll see videos. Yep. And I mean, I'm very, very pleased with what that silly little idea has brought to the society.
And you're on schedule to have that for 2022.
Yeah, I just spoke with the lady who owns the site this week, and we'll have an event announcement up in the next week or two.
There you go, folks. Save the date. Are you still looking at the middle of February, same weekend you've had before?
Yep. Yeah, well, I'm waiting to hear back. It's a really delicate time frame to try and shoehorn it in. Atlantia has a mirror. The Midrum has Candlemas. Out west is obviously Estrella War, and you're trying to shoehorn it into that spot.
Yeah.
And I mean, now it's kind of become a 400-pound gorilla. But that's what we're doing. After the first, I guess it was the second really big year, I had tried to get other people interested in making it kind of a roving thing. Sven had tried to track down a site in Dallas, but I think part of the reason Adult Swim became what it is, the entire I-95 corridor from Boston to, heck, all the way to Atlanta is just a traffic nightmare. And it's a pain for any of those people to go more than an hour to see anybody. But because none of them have to drive on I-95, we're able to get a phenomenal amount of people who just drive west. And we're not that far from the Cleveland group. The only thing we really need to make it the perfect place to go to, as far, we're in the middle of a lot of places of population density. So it works out well. I just wish we had an airport a little closer that didn't stink. I travel a lot from business, and 9 times out of 10, I fly out of Baltimore. That's a 3-hour drive because the airport here stinks.
Yeah, I know when we come out last couple of years, we just fly into Philadelphia, and last time we were there, spent a couple of days there, and Independence Hall, and and just hang out in Philly for a night and see some stuff, and then take our time driving up to Milton, and it's been, I mean, either flying into Philly or any of the airports in the New York area, it's still about a 3-hour drive up there, so it's really not that bad getting there from here as well. So
who knows? Maybe I'll talk to the guy who I handed off the autocrat keys to, and maybe we'll just charter a bus from Philly in the evening.
It might be something. Might be something. So no, it's like I said, when I first heard about it, you're definitely talking my language right off the bat there.
I mean, as I recall, Baron Ichi is the one who he said, I can get Duke Sean to come out. I'm like, really? That would be awesome. And if I remember, Ichi getting you to come is how we got Brian and Nigel. And, again, the snowball effect.
Yeah, because I called up Brian, and I talked to Gregor from the East as well, and I said, hey, I'm coming out of this thing that is 3 hours away from you. So I'm
flying out. You can drive 3 hours.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and bringing Timmer with me on that trip, and then last time we were out, we had Timmer and Damon came out with us, and Damon's our crown right now through the pandemic. But it's like we tell people all the time out here that, like, there comes a point in your career, and it doesn't have to be crown contender. There comes a point in your career, just like Sport of Kings is very much the same way, where, like, once you've hit a certain point, that's the place you need to be to have access to that level of training. And Adult Swim and Sport of Kings both have something in common that as a trainer, I find very appetizing. And that's, while you have access to some of the best trainers in the world, we as trainers have access to some of the best students in the world. And the people that go to Adult Swim and the people that go to Sport of Kings, I think are disproportionately invested in their own success. And they want to be better. And you don't get a lot of yeah but out of those fighters. You get people that are genuinely interested in being better, and they're going to listen to anybody they can. They're going to suck up as, you know, the buffet is that much bigger. And so, you know, they've got a lot more to pick and choose from, but they're going to sample all of the buffet.
Yeah, I'm so gonna steal Yaba. I mean,
You've never
Yeah.
heard? Oh my God, that are the I knowers. We had a guy for 2 years we called I know because that's all he knows.
Yeah,
Well,
I
we're
know.
hoping
And
to bring out
I
a
know. And yeah, but those are the quickest ways to end your fighting career.
Yeah. We're hoping to bring out a contingent from our area, from Michigan, for the next one, and see if I can convince Brannis and Ron Valder and several of the others around here to come out, and get some of our up and coming candidates and a bunch of other nights, and see if we can't make it.
if I remember, Branos was going to come out last time, but if I remembered, he just had shoulder surgery or something.
Yeah, but he's still one of the best trainers.
Yeah. Yes.
So,
I mean, I had the good fortune to be at one of the practices in Detroit. He's, I guess, 4 or 5 years back, and it was just, oh my gosh, to have this practice as a, you know, something I could hit regularly would just be amazing. But I'm, you know, just out here in the middle of nowhere, trying to build up our crop of younger fighters, you know, a little at a time, and we're getting there.
Well, it sounds like you're doing that in very much the same model, where, you know, the practice that we have here and the practice that Octa's at up in Stromgard are very much training oriented practices. You know, it sounds like, I mean, you long ago did away with the you know, the smash and bash, you know, get them on the field and let them figure it out training methodology, you know, which is something that I've been trying to stamp out in our society for a long time as well. You know, this idea that you just go out there and do the thing and eventually you'll figure it out. You know, the pain management training methodology, as some like they call it. And so, but, you know, and you are actively building a training focused, a training oriented practice. And it does take some time to build that, because you're the one person who's kind of trying to facilitate that as a trainer. And so you're kind of having to take all these unbelted fighters, and the first thing you have to do is teach them how to learn and teach them the value of drills and walkthroughs and demonstrations. And, you know, it's like, okay, you're not getting this, so here's how your sword goes. And, you know, I can tell you that, you know, our local practice here, ours has been a training oriented practice for more than 20 years. And we have entire generations of fighters who don't know that it's not like this everywhere you go. They don't know what it's like to be in a practice where they're like, oh, just go figure it out. So it's an initial upfront cost, but it's totally worth it. And you're doing the work that needs to be done for that.
We had a young, he's actually a math PhD, move here from somewhere in the south of Ohio, who'd been at one of those practices for 6 or 7 years. I mean, literally, he'd been fighting that long, and I would not have authorized him. He had learned so little from everybody just throwing armor, and, you know, you're gonna learn through pain management that you have to block this by such and such. Circumstances worked out that he's ended up working for me through most of the pandemic, and we ended up doing slow work. We've probably done 150 or 200 rounds of slow work in the last year. And right now, he's probably taking me 3 or 4 out of 10 with Buckler. And a couple of years ago, I wouldn't have authorized it. So training works. You know, if you explain things to people, that's all you have to do, and it pays off. And I you know, I'm doing things from doing slow work with him most days, I didn't dream of doing when I won Crown and Buckler a couple years ago. I'm doing techniques I couldn't have even imagined. And we've worked it out with slow work, and it's just I have such a better understanding of physiology than, hey, I can do this from that position. He can do this from that position. I have to plan for that. And it's been amazing. But
that all goes back to why.
Exactly. This is why we do this. This is why your feet are pointed the way they're pointed. This is why you don't want your feet 4 feet apart when you take a step. This is why. Instead of telling somebody don't do that, this is, you can do that if you really want to, but here are the repercussions. You have to plan for this, and this. And it pays off.
Yeah, we have another question come in on the feed there. How can the more accomplished folks facilitate younger fighters to getting to these events like Adult Swim, Sport of Kings, that sort of thing, during these trying economic times? Most 20, 30-year-olds don't have much in the way of travel funds in the current environment. So what can we do to get some of those younger folks there?
I mean, that's a really good thing. We tried to, the last swim, we had tried to arrange we had a carpool coordinator where it's if you wanted a ride to come to swim, if you couldn't swing it, whether it was gas or whatnot, we tried to arrange somebody who would go through. And I was kind of disappointed with the lack of people who availed themselves of that service. Yeah. I mean, I kind of, and I hate to use mundane buzzwords, but I kind of, act locally, think globally. Whenever I travel out of town for a practice or an event, I always post on Facebook, hey, I'm going to the Storvik practice this week. My route is down Route 83, all the way through Harrisburg, through York, down through Baltimore, and into College Park, Maryland. If you want to ride, I'll pick you up. So again, I only know how to do it from my local perspective. I mean, I think that's all any of us can do.
But I know the folks at Sport of Kings have always been really great about saying that. I mean, Octa can talk about this a little more than I can, that like, if you want to come here, we will make it as easy as possible. Like, it's, fly into Portland and, get you and your armor to Portland and we'll take care of the rest. I mean, I've flown up a couple of times and, they got a tent set up for me and everything. Well, I know it's at Sport of Kings, they have one communal kitchen that you can buy into on a meal by meal basis, the Virgin Countess. And that's part of the event. Is the way that they set that up is they've made it such that you don't have to have a full kitchen that you have to bring. That, like, they've really kind of set it up as much as possible to say, just get here with your armor and we'll help you manage to take care of everything else. So for those folks out there thinking about going to Sport of Kings, there are ways, there are folks that are very accommodating and ready to help with that.
Maybe I will put a little more thought into the concept of a bus from Philly or a bus from BWI. Yes, if maybe you have the points for leftover frequent flyer points, you can take a flight to Philly, but you'd still have to rent a car and get a hotel room.
Right.
We're not frightfully densely populated here, so there's not a whole lot of crash space available. But if you don't have to rent a car, there's a couple of $100 that doesn't have to be spent. Maybe that's something we can think about. I mean, it's February, so I'm not really going to set tents up for people in the middle of central Pennsylvania.
Right.
Right. But who knows? We're about to move into a new house. Maybe I'll talk my wife into letting people roll out sleeping bags in the.
Is that the house that used to be a church?
Yeah. We
Nice.
unfortunately can't close to October, but she's let me. She's agreed to let me have fighter practice in the former sanctuary. So I'm pretty anxious for that, but I don't know if she's going to go for 100 people in sleeping bags on the floor.
Well, we've got we're planning for spring training out here in April of next year as well, and we're limited on a crash space in the house. But when we did this 6 years ago, we had 100 people fighting in our backyard, so we have the space to do that. So we're really looking forward to that one next year too.
Yeah. I haven't talked her into it yet, but we're gonna do a tour of the Southwest United States, and it'll coincide with that. Unfortunately, last spring was her 25th anniversary, and I had been working out the plans for a tour of the American Southwest so she and I can, celebrate our anniversary. And then, of course, the world shut down. So I owe her a trip.
Yeah.
Nice.
Let's circle back real quick to the whole facilitating fighters, younger fighters, maybe they can't afford it. You can always do like you've done with Adult Swim and invite some key folks, and get some people to come out, or find a central location where you can get 3 or 4 of your local groups to all converge. That's doable. We've done night road shows where we've brought a truckload of nights and we go to an area. We're there to
we've just started that back up. I have held a practice 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. I held a practice halfway between us and the next group. And I'm setting the roving practices up around the kingdom once a month. And I've been arm twisting some of my fellow knights that, look, this next one's going to be in BMDL, come on out. Or, the one after that is going to be in St. Swithenbach, make the trip out. So, I mean, I am always open for new ideas to what we can do to foster folks. I mean, my loaner equipment is always available for folks. My shop is always open for folks. I can make munitions grade armor, but I can't do. I'm certainly not an armoring laurel by the broadest stretch of the imagination. But everything I can do to get people out there and make sure they have a good time, so they want to come back and do it again, I try and do.
Yep.
That's fantastic.
Tim, we got about 10 minutes. Is there anything else that you want to talk about you haven't covered yet?
No, like I said, I really appreciate the opportunity to do this. I'm just looking forward to seeing everybody face to face again. I think this is a really good thing, and frankly, I'd like to go back and find your one where you talk to people about how to analyze video, so some of the people who work with me can look at themselves and see what they're doing.
I will put a link to that in the live thread, or in the feed here when we get done here. So I think the first one we did was November last year, and that was the one where we did the this is how to do analysis, and then we put out a call. And actually, we're going to be doing some more coming up, because we've had a few folks that said they were interested in doing some more. But we did a series for a while there where we took a couple of unbelted fighters and did analysis for them, and then gave them some information to work with. So so there's a whole series of those. Those are all on the the Coach's Corner YouTube channel for sure. But I will post the one that we did on the how to. I'll post the link to the live.
Yeah, I mean,
here.
like I said, when I'm looking at myself, I know what I'm looking for. But since that's not something I do, it'll be informative for the people I work with.
Yeah, that's a how-to. That's one of the classes that I do when I do my fighting clinic, is how to analyze video. We'll go over some theory on Saturday, and then we'll fight Saturday afternoon, take all the video, and then go to somebody's house, get some pizza and beer, and I'm going to show people how to actually break things down, because there's so many people that look at their video and they're like, oh, look, there's me sucking, so let me rewind that and just watch me suck some more. But they don't know what to do with it, and they don't know how to break it down and to isolate those things. That's something that I actually teach people, how to break that down.
Well, and I think that's a valuable skill that translates into that, that lizard brain when you're fighting. If you've analyzed yourself enough, you start to pick the triggers up when you're fighting somebody. And then to Timothy's point of view, you learn where they have to throw blows, where they can throw blows, and where they can't. And it allows you to, in the fight, be able to interpret that better.
Yeah, and it's much more effective to do that kind of analysis live, where you can ask somebody, okay, what were you thinking here, and what can we do here? But it's easier to learn how to do that level of analysis using video, where you have the option to do frame by frame and half, slow motion and half speed and that sort of stuff. So yeah, I'll put a link up for that.
Alrighty, well, thank you very, very much for having me on.
Yeah, Tennessee, we're delighted to have you. Thanks again so much for your insights. It's been a great conversation. Like we always like to just kind of let these things go where they will, and I think it's been great the way that this has gone on. So thanks for all you do for the society at large. We really appreciate it. Your enthusiasm is absolutely infectious. So we're happy to have you.
Thanks a lot.
I just wanted to say it's good to see you. It's been too long since we've seen each other, and tramped up and down the course of Penzic
at 2:00 in the morning.
Yeah. So it's good to see you.
Yep. Have a wonderful day. Everybody stay healthy, and I can't wait to see you all again.
So coming up next week on the Coach's Corner, we have an episode on how to be a good student and or training partner. So this is going to be a discussion of things to consider as you start your fighting career, what types of questions to ask, and how to find the best resources for your learning style. So we're going to have that. So tune in for that so you can kind of get an idea. We talk a lot about how to be a good trainer, but it's also in your best interest as a new fighter to have an understanding of what it means to be a good student as well. So looking forward to that. And as always, I would like to thank Vesper for keeping us on track and getting the session all set up for us, and her efforts to broadcast us live. So thank you as always.
Thank you. It was a great show. It was wonderful. So everybody, please tune in next week for our great Friday night, and hope you all have a wonderful weekend and week coming up.
We'll see you there. Thanks again, Tim.
All right.
Good.
Bye.
Bye.